Sarah Boone's attorney, James Owen, spoke to a couple of outlets, and y'all, buckle up, she was genuinely surprised at the outcome. We're going to talk about that in these interviews in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the Sofa. Sofa's still invisible because it's not there. My name's Paul. I'm not invisible. Well, maybe. I don't know. I'm still not at home. I'm still kind of traveling and getting stuff done and whatnot. But that doesn't slow us down from doing some updates, okay? Now, on the plate today is, yes, some more Sarah Boone. What we're going to do specifically in this video is we're going to look at two different interviews. One being a recent one with Ashley Banfield from News Nation. Another one being an interview he did like right after the verdict, so it's a little bit old at this point. But we're going to talk about those because when I watched the one from Ashley, which is like more recent, she's so good, y'all. I met her at CrimeCon, y'all. She is so nice. I absolutely adore her. She asks all the questions that you're thinking, like in your brain, like, oh my God, please ask this. She asked it, okay? So I absolutely love that. And she kind of comes at this stuff too, like in the way, like the tone that we're thinking it in our head, like, really? You know, kind of a thing. So anyways, we're going to do hers first. But when I was listening to it, I was just like, I guess I'm still dumbfounded that Sarah was just dumbfounded herself at the verdict. Now, if you are new to this, whatever, very quickly to let you know, Sarah Boone has been convicted. She was accused of unaliving her boyfriend, Jorge Torres, by somehow getting him into a suitcase and leaving him in there overnight, basically. Video evidence surfaced of her berating him while he asked to be let out. She went upstairs, she fell asleep, allegedly forgot about him, whatever. Came downstairs, he was dead the next morning. Well, from that, this case went viral, okay? Her interrogation with the police went viral because she was like, oh, look at my phone, you'll see that he abused me and all this stuff. Well, when the cops look at her phone, they find the video of her berating him while he begs for his life. Now, this would almost 5 years later, go to trial. She would turn down a 15-year manslaughter deal from the state, like right before, at the threshold of trial in the courtroom, she turns it down, okay? Now she's facing a minimum of 22 years, and I can tell you the judge is going to do way more than that, okay? So she took this to trial. She claimed battered spouse syndrome. She lost, and more evidence came out in the trial. Damning evidence, things that she videotaped of her being really horrible to George, okay? So it's very surprising to see that she thought that was going to work for her, because clearly it didn't, okay? Now, the way we're going to do this is I've taken some clips from both interviews that stick out the most and I want to comment on. I'll play them, I'll comment on them. Keep in mind, I am not a cop, an investigator, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. I ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? The only credentials we got up in here is the sofa, some sass, and well, some self-diagnosed personality disorders on my behalf. Okay, but that's a whole other video. That's a whole other day and a whole other video, right? So, but just know these are just my opinions based on very public information, okay? So they're just that, right? They're just for entertainment purposes only, right? But I do encourage you to drop your opinion down below in the comment section. So let's go ahead, let's visit the interview with Ashley. Again, this is News Nation, and let's get into the first clip.
Mr. Owens, it's great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for being with me. What was your client's reaction when she heard the verdict, guilty, read in court?
Yeah, it was this past Friday evening, and I would say shock. We were not, she nor I were anticipating guilty as charged.
Okay, these are the moments where I literally am like this. I'm like, of course he's not going to say, well, she was shocked, but I wasn't. Like, I was totally, expecting her to go down. I mean, you're not going to say that about your client, right? But nonetheless, I'm still thinking in my mind, I'm like, surely he was, no. Like, no. But then if you think about it, like, if you're in the case, and mind you, he only came on, like, I think 45 days before. But it's almost like if you're working with these cases and you're like, we're going with this theory, we're doing this, it's almost like they need, and when I say they, I'm talking about whether it's defense or state or whoever, a completely neutral outsider source to look at them and look at the information and say, nope, absolutely not. Now, we will find out in these interviews, they basically had that, right? People were doing this with Sarah, but she was like, nope, it's my way or the highway. And we saw that behavior coming from her on the stand during the trial throughout these years, watching her, where basically you couldn't tell her nothing, right? It just comes down to that old saying, you couldn't tell her nothing. It was her way or the highway. Let's go to that next club.
We considered that the jury might convict her of lesser charge, or the first lesser was manslaughter and the second lesser was culpable negligence.
You know, on that, as the trial was going and more information was coming out, and we were seeing some of these pictures of her injuries and whatnot, and I was questioning the state, like, where are we going with some of this? And their expert witness just said she has battered spouse syndrome and all this type of stuff. I was like this. I was like, oh, they're gonna probably say no to the manslaughter and get her on that lesser charge, right? The culpable negligence. Only until we got into the very end of the trial and the state started pulling out all that other evidence, and it was just going on top, basically during the state's rebuttal, and they were like pulling out the videos of her harassing him on the floor at 1:30 in the morning. Those crazy videos, okay? I felt like the state really held off till the end to really drive it home. And then what really drove it home after they presented all that was the judge outlining, bam, this is the way of the law. He explained it so well, and it was like, if A, B, and C are present, you have met the criteria for the biggest charge. If D, E, and F are not there, you have not. You see what I'm saying? And for me, when I was watching it, and again, I went into it thinking she's either going to get like a sorrow hung jury, like somebody felt bad, or they're going to hit her with that lesser charge. But after they showed the evidence and they did that, I was like, I'm sorry, unless somebody's going just on their emotions, from my non-legal perspective, they've hit that criteria for that big charge. And I mean, we see what happened.
So yeah, she was in shock that they found her guilty as charged, which was the second-degree murder.
Okay, did you hear that right there when he goes, yeah, she was in shock. It was like he slipped a little bit. I think that's where the truth came out, where it's like, yes, she was. He probably wasn't. He tried it. We'll find out. He tried to tell her. It's like, girl, take the plea. We take the plea. And as we'll hear here in a little bit, basically the only reason she was letting him work is because he worked with her. He did what she wanted. This was Sarah's show. Now, I will hand it to her in this way. And mind you, it didn't work out for her. The way she was able to drag this case out for 4 and almost 5 years, y'all. Hats off, right? I mean, for whatever you're nodding your hat to with that, procrastination, determination, stubbornness, I don't know, okay? But my God, I mean, I'm just like, what? But as you see, part of that driving force, again, this is just my opinion, I think was that she literally was like, I'm innocent. I am not going to get convicted of something, and I'm going to absolutely just take to this very edge because I'm innocent. I think that's really how she viewed it. She was so steadfast on being innocent. Again, you couldn't tell her nothing.
I'm struggling to figure that one out because I had made a bet that the jury would come back under 2 hours, and they did. I found her wholly dislikable all through the entire process from the moment she was arrested to the moment she was convicted. I can't imagine I'm alone. Everyone I've spoken to who's been following the case, albeit not in the courtroom, has said the same thing. They'll throw the book at her. Why did your client and why did you feel that wasn't going to happen?
Okay, that's right. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the video with Ashley. I mean, is she not expressing how we felt? It's so nice to see a journalist or reporter just kind of speak like we do, right? And not be like, well, on the official first day and we're being all professional. She's professional. I'm not trying to say she's not. But she just has this way of just like calling out common sense stuff where it's like, she's like, I predicted less than 2 hours. It was less than 2 hours. Okay. The same thing. She was unlikable. This is a majorly unlikable person, right? But again, one thing with James Owens to remember is that he took the case up for whatever his motivating factors were, right? Whatever those were, he took the case on very late in the game, whatever. He had to work with Sarah. That was his client. He had to basically do what she wanted to do, right? On that level, it's almost like, well, yeah, he might be thinking behind closed doors, like, yeah, she's completely unlikable, but I'm trying to get, my book here, or whatever the case is, or, whatever the deal was, my money, or whatever, I mean, the defense people are put in a position where they often have to represent people that they don't like either. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure this is part of it. Maybe he felt a little bit sorry for her on some level, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think that he saw what the other attorneys went through, and I guess this is one of the things I just love this question from Ashley, because it is like, yeah, what were y'all think? How did y'all not see that? How did y'all not think that this would go any other way, especially putting her on the stand as such an unlikable individual?
Well, she actually did pretty good on the stand if you watch her testimony.
That's the disconnect I'm talking about. Okay, yikes. Now, okay, let's like put emotion aside. My thing is when I say she didn't do good on the stand, I say she didn't do good on the stand because I felt like she lied the whole time. I say she didn't do good on the stand because she came across as so insanely unlikable. Like literally, I felt like the jury was probably over there like this, like, can't roll my damn eyes hard enough. She was so smarmy. She was so controlling. She was so fake. It's like you could see right through. In fact, I felt like her time on the stand, if anything, illustrated to the jury the misery that George probably lived with on a daily basis. But now here's this, in Mr. Owen's defense, do you think if Sarah was your client, number one, we've heard ever since the beginning, I just want to tell my side of the story. I just want to talk. You knew from the get-go she was going to take that stand, right? Period. End of story. Again, with the theme for this video, you can't tell her nothing. Might name the damn thumbnail that. You can't tell her nothing. That actually would be confusing. But anyways, but again, you couldn't tell her anything with this. So of course he was going to have to let her on the stand. It was a train wreck that was inevitable.
As you mentioned earlier, the decision as to whether or not to accept a plea offer or to take the case to trial is ultimately only the client's decision. You know, lawyer can tell her the pros and cons and the strengths and weaknesses of her position versus the state's position.
Sure. Did you recommend to her to take the deal and she went against your recommendation? Because knowing how she's been with the last, 8 trial attorneys who, she spent before you, I would imagine that would be a scenario, I believe.
And probably so. Now, again, you heard him say it's up to the client whether they take the deal or not. I mean, some of this stuff is just like at the end of the day, the lawyer can only do so much. They can present their stuff and say, here's what I think you should do. And they were doing that from the beginning. I can assure you, those very beginning attorneys, if they looked at this evidence and they went to her and she was talking about, well, we're going to do a battered spouse thing. And they were like, girl, are you insane? Like, absolutely not. And probably also she was trying to get them to do things that might jeopardize their own, their license or whatever you call it. I mean, that's your career, that's your livelihood, that's your life, right? Your college degree, all that type of stuff. So I'm sure she was asking them to do some whatever stuff. But again, a lot of attorneys are going to see that. And like, when you try and talk sense into her, like, they've got really bad evidence against you. I think we should probably maybe go on this route. And she's over here talking about, no. And then berating you in open court over it. No thanks, honey. I'm done. You're done.
Well, we talked about it in depth, and I try not to give my opinion initially. I want them to try to make the decision on their own, and then if they ask me for my opinion, then I give it to them based on
Did she?
Yes.
What'd you say?
Well, that was something that I suggested she strongly consider.
This is how I love the way Ashley's questioning him. Did she? Literally, before she could even spit the words out, my mind's going, did she? What'd she say? Right. I'm like, yes, girl, yes. Drill this man with these hard-hitting questions. He's like, you can tell he's like, well, Now, I do like his technique where he's like, you know what? Here's this information. This is the offer. This is what we're dealing with. I want you to tell me what you want to do. Right? Let them come to that conclusion and then come to you. Well, I think I can beat this, Mr. Owen. I mean, I got more videotape on that phone. I think I can beat it. Okay. Well, guess what, Sarah? You want my opinion now? So we've seen what you're saying. I see where you're coming from. This is my opinion having done this, but at the end of the day, it's your show. So personally, I would heavily consider the deal. You could be going home very soon. Ashley's going to do the math on it here in a minute. You could be going home very soon, but at the end of the day, it's their life, right? I mean, it's Sarah's life or the client or whatever. You don't want to sit here and make somebody do something and be like, no, you have to take this. You have to. How's that going to go over, right? So I like his approach with that. I think that's like the professional way to do it. And I'm sure it's frustrating when you, as a professional who've been in this industry, you've done this, and you can see like, bro, you're getting ready to get absolutely run over the coals. You're throwing your life away, right? Now, this is taking completely out of context, like in my personal opinion of, do I think being behind bars for a while is where someone like Sarah probably needs to be to figure things out? You know what I'm saying? I'm just looking at it from the generic thing of like how things go procedurally and whatnot. And I think that that's a good way that he does stuff. Again, on that level, I think that a lot of stuff happens for reasons. I think someone like Sarah, you couldn't tell her anything, right? She kind of threw herself in the briar patch. And I think it's going to take a long, long time for her to realize the ramifications of the lifestyle and the behaviors and the way that she treated probably a lot of people. Okay, I mean, I don't think this just ended at George. Maybe this was an extremity, like, you know, a situation, but I don't think it just ended there. I mean, Brian said that she was the aggressor, right? So, and I'm not to say that, you know, George didn't do anything to her, that whatever, I'm sure she's had some issues go on, right? As many people will say, and even in this, it was a toxic relationship. They shouldn't have been together. That much is clear to all of us.
Was that plea? I think with 15 years, you know, you do 80% of that sentence here in Florida, plus she'd done already 4.5 years. So she would have had, I think, about 8 years to do.
That's a real hard pill to swallow. Real hard pill. Imagine going back to her cell that night, literally riding up to it thinking she's getting ready to go home. Starbucks order placed, expired coupons ready to be spent. You know what I'm saying? Bartles and James ready to be snatched up off the bottom shelf. I mean, she had that Friday night planned out, y'all. So she's ready to go home, and then you get hit with that, and then you're letting that sink in. I could have done 8 more years, because it's like, yeah, girl, you're going to be in there for probably decades. The judge ain't going to give her 22 years. Now, he did make note, and they say this somewhere in one of these interviews about how it's her first time felony. I think this is a fair judge, and I think that we'll be surprised at his sentence. And what I mean by surprised is, so it's like 22 and a half to life, basically. I do not think she'll get life, okay? I think he's going to look at it and be like, you need to learn to take accountability, and you've done, like, just even the thing that she's done with the court system. I could see him being like 30 to 40 with parole after, however it works, you know what I'm saying? But I think she's surely probably going to be doing a solid 15 to 20 more years in prison, okay? Unless she does an appeal. That's a whole other situation that we don't even know if we're mentally ready for.
Preparing her for that, she's going to speak at that, and then there's a pre-sentence investigation that the judge ordered, so we'll work on that.
Now, key ingredient of that clip, she's going to speak. Let's just talk about that real quick. Let's talk about what we would like to see and what the reality is. What is it that meme that goes, what you thought you were buying, what you got? Okay, that's, you know, this is what we think we're buying. If Sarah gets up there, now it's too late to be talking about, I've learned a lesson, all that. It'll come off too fake. She needs to address the court and in an authentic way, whatever that means for her. Take some accountability for her part in things. Doesn't mean she has to say, George and I's relationship was perfect and I was the only thing wrong in it. We're not asking for that. The courts, and more importantly than us, like, right, it's the court, right? It's the victims. She's going to need to take some kind of accountability. Ashley's going to ask him in a minute, is she going to show any kind of remorse, right? That's what the court's going to want to see, because he already knows, the judge, Kranek, I think is his name, it's too fresh, right? It's going to take her a while to let that sink in. So that's what needs to happen. This is what I think she'll do. Okay, I'm going to compare it to this. Remember Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke when they got up? They addressed the court for sentencing and whatnot, and Ruby had like this very manufactured like speech that was like a Hallmark, you know, a red carpet moment, and Jody was more kind of like, where am I? Guess I did something wrong. It's going to be somewhere in a mix of those where I think she will kind of be like, I'm really sorry for the lessons I've learned, but, you know, if George had it, it's going to have some energy like that. I think she will, the central thing to her speech, whatever she says, will be that she is a victim in some way. Whether she is a victim of alcoholism, whether she is a victim of mental health, they are going to have somebody speak to that. It will be some level of victimization, because one thing that I learned from Sarah and her MO and her currency, if you will, is that it is victimhood. This seems to be how she maneuvers through life. It seems to be what's worked for her. Whatever traumas she's dealt with in life, right, from wherever they came from, that seemed to work for her. And it's something that she did, but this is a scenario of like the buck stops here.
Well, you know, there's a range, and I think the state attorney had said the low end was 22 years, and of course, life is the top of the range, and the judge is going to have to make a decision.
So, like I said, I just want to put that out there to kind of have the professional saying it. So you hear the range, she's going to have to make that decision. And again, all the things that I just said, I just feel like it's going to be somewhere in there. I don't think he'll give her 22 and a half. I don't think he'll give her life, but I think he's going to make her really think about what she's done for the last 5 years. Okay, now that was all of the interview with Ashley I wanted to show and go over and whatnot. Now we're going to rewind even more to the night of the verdict, and we're going to go to Court TV, and we are going to watch an interview like after the verdict or whatever that he held with a reporter there. So let's get to that first clip.
James, what's your reaction to the verdict? just disappointed. Sarah's devastated. She's disappointed. We felt like we had a good defense with the facts that we had. Obviously, we had some hurdles to overcome for the state's evidence, and for whatever reason, the jury didn't see it our way. We respect the jury's decision. I'm sure that Sarah Boone is going to want to appeal. I believe that she does have potentially 2 or 3 good appellate issues. So the next thing in store is I think we've got sentencing set for, I believe, Monday, December the 2nd at 1:30.
So again, the wound is fresh here. This is right after Sarah's devastated and whatnot. I mean, I just, again, I would have been baffled. Like, how did she not see that coming, right? He said there were some hurdles. Again, he's being very professional. He can't speak like the sofa, right? Yeah, the state brought some bombshell stuff out there, dude. I mean, I'm sorry. And again, with Sarah, it's like, girl, you knew this was there. That's the psychologically frustrating and infuriating and like baffling part with this, is that she thought those videos were going to make people feel bad for her. Like, make it look like she's the victim. Like, oh my God, look at what I have to deal with. He's sleeping outside my door at 1:30 in the morning. No, that's absolutely not the way that was interpreted. Okay, like at all, right? And especially with the state's closing, their closing was so effective. The use of the device of the suitcase and having Sarah manipulate it and seeing her not being able to open it, right? Hearing him clink that baseball bat down, hearing him let us know we don't have to believe that she hit him in the suitcase. In fact, it doesn't make sense, right? It makes more sense that she attacked him outside of it. It makes more sense that she maybe pushed him down the stairs. Bringing this imagery up, it was done. And so I go back to, but again, it doesn't matter. These lawyers could have shown her all that 10 times over, and she, no, that's to my benefit. I didn't do that. That wasn't intentional. Like, she could never let go of that concept, ever. Okay, like ever, right? And that's why I'm like, okay, but even with all the little stuff that she's done the research, I'm like, girl, when they offered you that 15 years and you're over here talking about it's not intentional, this, that, and the other, you should know enough by now with the stuff you've been doing to know like what manslaughter is, okay? And so for her to just like double down about it, but I didn't mean to do it, you know, and I really think in her world, she thought she was going to get in front of that jury and do what she's done her whole life, which was explain and manipulate, and people would believe her and feel sorry for her and just want her to go away and give her what she wants. But in this case, it's like, no, they're going home and they're ready to go home. Like, this was like, are you crazy? Why are we even here? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like a week-long trial over a traffic ticket, okay? Like, are you serious? They were probably pissed off. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, yeah, they want you to go away, but you're going away is like going away.
And we intend to call Dr. Harper as a witness to speak about her other mental health issues that she struggles with, and hopefully the court will consider that.
Now, this is what I'm talking about. I think that will be a central theme of the, you know, them going up here and whatnot, and Sarah's up there talking about that. We're going to get to a thing in a moment about her battered spouse syndrome that I'll comment on, because I think all that's going to come into play, and whatever these other mental health issues she has and whatnot, I think that's all going to come into play with it. But again, you have to remember that even though, you know, if you look at the human side of it, which yes, you know, there's George as well, okay? Whatever Sarah lived through in her lifetime, I'm not talking about George, I'm talking about her whole life, right? Whatever that is, whatever traumas, whatever stuff that's happened that has driven her to go down this path where she's at, of just this messy living to the point of somebody losing their life, and the absolute just seething rage that we saw in her in these videos and whatnot. You know, it's like she's gonna have to find the inner ability to self-reflect on that, to be able to move past that. And if she can't, she will sit in prison for the entire term that they're going to give her, right? If she is not able to do that. And that's one thing that I think I kind of expected to see after 4.5 years, was some level of like, oh, wait a second, you know what, I might not have meant to do that in the way they're saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I believe her on that level. I do think she was punishing him, but I don't think she like sought out that day to do that, right? To have some level of that self-reflection, but it's been the opposite effect.
And so Sarah Boone maintained that she wanted a trial the entire time, and we did discuss, there were plea negotiations, and there were offers on the table for the lesser charge of manslaughter. But Sarah ultimately rejected those offers and wanted her day in court.
And so there you have it. This is what was going on. I mean, and this is fresh, right? So he's saying, yep, the offers were on the table. Remember when he first came in here, he meaning Mr. Owens, he thought that he was, according to him, he was going to just broker a plea deal and come in and kind of make this happen. And this is just clearly what needs to take place. And she's like, I want my day in court. Again, this is what I'm talking about when I say the ability to self-reflect and whatnot. Nobody, no matter what, nobody wants to sit here and be like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to sign up for 20 years or 15 or whatever. I get that. Okay, that's normal, human, whatever. But there also has to be this level of looking at something. And one would think that over the years would have happened with numerous people telling you something like, girl, this ain't going to work out the way you want. Of looking at the lesser evil. And it's almost like you go to trial and that's what you're risking, but they're offering you this right here. You could sign up and go do this. And she might be like, well, I didn't do that. It wasn't intentional. I didn't do it. I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do. And that's the core of the issue that I personally see from my vantage point, which I get is just the sofa, okay, is she does not believe she did anything wrong, period. That's it. In her world, she did nothing wrong. That's where she's going to have to switch that mindset in order to get anywhere.
She felt, it seemed throughout this entire trial, she seemed to be very upbeat. It seemed, though, I was getting the sense she really felt she hadn't done anything criminally wrong.
Well, I think, I believe she's a better spouse. And I believe she believes she's a better spouse. Once she learned, and we gave her a bunch of material about the subject, once she learned, what she had gone through with Jorge Torres, I think she believed she was a better spouse. So we believed in that scenario that she was justified.
I couldn't roll my damn eyes hard enough at this. Okay, so when he said key ingredient of this clip, the reason I put up here, when we gave her the material on battered spouse syndrome, now there's already screenshots of the book on the desk and their thing about like battered spouse syndrome and her looking through it. I bet she did come up with all the elements. We've seen her behavior. You can't tell me she doesn't look through that and say, oh yeah, I've got a temperature of 98, feeling a little shaky. Yeah, I've got the flu. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, of course that's how that went from there on out. That tells you everything you need. Why would you give her that? I mean, that's my question there. Like, why even, I get she could probably get her hands on it, but I mean, that's so transparent to me. It's just, and I'm not trying to negate the fact that there's documented evidence of stuff going back and forth, but I think where her case fell apart is when people saw her how she was over the week and a half trial, and I'm talking about the jurors, right? I'm kind of coming at this from the perspective of like that. Obviously, we saw her for years, but even that week and a half that they met her and saw this, they saw this behavior creep out, and then when they saw all the video evidence, that's where they saw like this, like the real Sarah, not what was being presented to them, and that's where it was like, yeah, this isn't lining up with what you're saying. I mean, I would venture to say that probably it wouldn't shock me if a lot of the jurors were like, we felt that Jorge was the battered spouse, right? I think if several people came away with that feeling.
You really put up a good fight. Were you surprised that the jurors came back as quickly as they did?
I was. I think that, the rebuttal evidence where they played a bunch of videotapes of off Sarah's phone, where there were some interactions with Sarah and Jorge, I think that affected the jury.
Really badly it did. Okay, that affected everybody watching, okay? For little Miss Sarah, again, like that dynamic, right? Just those, before we even talk about the text messages, her sending to George's mother and family, okay? That's the whole other thing. Just the videos that we saw on the phone, the extra ones in addition to the suitcase video enough, right? But then it was like, okay, well, what's the more context? The more context was, this is an everyday occurrence. But in her world, she was documenting abuse. That's why I really think, like, from a psychological standpoint, again, I'm not a doctor, but like I'm thinking for like people who do that, it's almost like she centers herself in the universe, in her universe, as a victim of any circumstance, right? It could be, I spilled the milk, that's not my fault. It's the universe's fault, or you know what I'm saying? So because her outlook is victimhood, everything goes through that filter. So that's why to us, when we see a videos like we saw, and it's like, you thought that was gonna help? How, what? Why would you record that? It makes you look really, really bad. You're like berating him in But in her world, it's, well, he's doing this, he's not acting the way I want him to, and it's like, but that's just a person being a person. And then like the one, like, so for example, that's like, well, Paul, what about the TV thing? I felt like she set him up for the TV smashing. You know, and the one where she was like, he wasn't seeing something right, and she was getting more angry. And then the one where she woke up, or she woke up at 1:30, and she's like, I don't want you in here. He finally started grabbing the phone. I'm like, what do you think he's gonna do? He walks down the stairs, you follow him, you keep berating him, you keep coming after him. You know, clearly there's alcohol involved with everybody, so nobody's making sound decisions. This was only gonna ever end in a really bad way.
Got in a bunch of evidence about, like I said, the video interactions between George and Sarah, and some of that, it seemed like Sarah was berating him a little bit and talking down to him a little bit. And, you know, the state had argued that this was a mutual abusive situation, that Sarah verbally, emotionally maybe abused him. So I think there was some of that going on in the relationship. It was a dysfunctional, toxic relationship. Obviously, those two didn't need to be together.
I mean, amen, brother, right? In that video that we just saw there where he's on the stairs, and I mean, look how thin the man is. You know, you can tell he's kind of like, huh? Whether he drank all the alcohol she's talking about, it's almost irrelevant. I mean, it's probably more relevant if he did, because they're both in this like contorted frame of mind, right? But also when you sit here and like listen to her on the stand, and these moments that she would describe, like, and this is just one example of how she like gaslit or blamed George for everything, and then other people as well. But when she was like, Brian has this, you know, problem with bringing my son over at the wrong times, like when George is drunk, and you know, we've seen this evidence where it's like, girl, isn't the same could be said for you? You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of a thing. So that's where I really believe that in just her world, because of the way she views everything through the lens of, I am a victim, I am a martyr, she would think recording a video berating him at 1:30 in the morning and picking at him constantly until he snaps makes her look good. And the things that she's talking about being a victim over, it's like, because he's sleeping outside your door, you know. And again, it's not to say that there probably wasn't some point in time where there was some form of abuse back and forth and whatnot, but again, those weren't like recorded on video, right? The times that she's recording that she thinks she's being abused, I'm like, what didn't you record that you were doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, that part blows my mind. Also, the parts where we saw the police coming to the house, it's like she loved that attention. She loved calling the cops. It was like she got drunk and used that phone as a weapon and started calling the police and threatening George. And then even the police would be like, well, now you're adding this and changing the story and doing this. I mean, it was like a game in that household.
But they, for whatever reason, they could not stay away from each other. And even when she had been battered multiple times by him over time, for whatever reason, they couldn't break up. And it just, I think everybody around, law enforcement, the neighbors, family, all knew how bad the situation was, but for whatever reason, they were drawn to each other and couldn't let go.
And that's the key ingredient of that clip right there, is that towards the end, I think law enforcement, all these people knew they were bad for each other. And I think that's probably what was going on, because just a little bit of the life of George and Sarah that we've seen over the last few years, it's like you saw this coming. So imagine being around them, related, whatever, in the years leading up to that incident, where you just saw it was inevitable. Something really bad's going to come of this if these two don't get help. If these two don't quit drinking, quit whatever, and get away from each other, it's going to implode, and sadly it did.
And they came back with the highest charge. I was hoping maybe for something lesser, but we understand. Sarah's in shock. You know, it happened, and then she was escorted out of the court fairly quickly, so we really didn't get a chance to talk that much.
I mean, that part right there, Sarah's in shock. I mean, anybody would be, right? But again, that's from like how you know that bailiff loved hauling her off. You know shit. Because you know Sarah's been probably gassing that whole thing up, being like, you're not going to do this for much longer. You know what I'm saying? You know the little lady I'm talking about. We've seen her this whole time, having to take her in out of that damn courtroom. But I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Again, it's just the disconnect that blows my mind with it. It's like next level.
Mr. Owens, you were not her first attorney. She went through several attorneys. How was she to work with?
She was fine. I think once she realized, it wasn't just me. And I spent a lot of time down here with her. And then once she realized Tony Henderson really helped me out a lot with Sarah Boone. And, I've represented some difficult clients. I've been doing it quite a while. But Sarah, was, of course, she didn't want to give up the power because she'd had the case for 4.5 years. She had so many different lawyers. So, but I think once she started to trust us and realized that we really cared about her, we really believed in her, and we wanted to do everything we could to fight for her, I think she finally, I say finally, it didn't take too long for her to develop a sense that we were really genuinely trying to help her.
Now, I do like his response here because I think it's appropriate. And the way that he said, gaining the trust, and when she saw that we believed in her, and that she wanted to do it this way and that way and all that type of stuff. And it took a while to get the trust going, but once she did, it was this, that, and the other, whatever. She wasn't that difficult to work with. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what we might think of the crime or the whatever, everybody deserves a defense and everybody deserves a good defense. And I'm sure, these people, and when I say these people, I mean like the public defenders and people like that, they are insanely overburdened. And so for a case that, and when I say this, complicated, I get that it's not complicated, but nonetheless it's a murder charge, right? It's going to be complicated. It just, Sarah made it more complicated. But for something like this, yes, if you have your attorneys coming in and whisking in there and talking about and they act like they don't care, it's going to be alarming, okay? Of course it's easy to make fun of and poke at 9 lawyers and all that from the sofa, but at the end of the day, I do respect his response. And also it shows us, yes, this was what Sarah wanted the whole time. She wanted someone to listen to her and to do it the way that she said. She wanted them to do it because in her world, she knew it has to go. If it can go this way, I'm walking. And she luckily got this dude who at the end walked her through it, and she was able to finally, unfortunately, see that she was wrong. Unfortunately for her, right? Nonetheless, if she had not run into Mr. Owens and she represented herself, y'all, we still probably be going over opening statements at this point, okay? I can't imagine.
What she was saying in that 2-minute video to George while he was in the suitcase, I'm convinced was tied to the trauma that she had received from the abuse that she had suffered from George. And I just think Dr. Harper, it's a complex syndrome. It really is. And it's difficult for lay people to understand. I've tried to talk to the psychologist, the psychiatrist about it to try to understand it. Why somebody wouldn't leave that situation. Why, if they're getting beaten up, they're getting stabbed in the leg, why wouldn't you leave that situation? It's one of those things, it's a head scratcher for a lot of people.
Now, here's the thing with this, and I do think when he's talking about the complexities of abusive relationships, not leaving and being stuck or going back and whatnot, this is very true, right? And it works out this way a lot of times. The thing that is different with this particular case for me is that I feel like this wasn't just a one-way street, right? Sarah had all the control from my vantage point, okay? She helped George get his birth certificate, all these documents, which she withheld. She destroyed some we saw evidence of. She had the car keys, she had the phone, she had the apartment. You see what I'm saying? She had everything. George was over here, and then the ultimate control, I do believe, was him being on probation and her picking that phone. I'll call the probation officer. I'll call the police. She controlled his freedom. And so this is the dynamic where you start to shift the lens over from her being the victim, the battered spouse, to, well, hold on. All these key elements are present for him too. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I would argue they both could probably qualify for the syndrome. Now, what got it for me is when the judge was explaining towards the end of the jury instructions, and he was like, you can have battered spouse syndrome all the way over here and that be present, but it can also not affect the current scenario. And I was like, oh, done, finished. Go on, sign her up, send her down. You know what I'm saying? That answered everything for me, in addition to the other stuff the judge said, because I was like, oh, 100%. If she does have that, truly, I don't think that was playing out in this moment. I don't believe that she thought she was in fear of her life at all. I think that she manipulated him into that suitcase and probably gave him a good beating up and down before he got in it and after he got in it. I think he was probably afraid for his life the whole time, and I think there was probably many situations that she put him in that was probably the feeling.
At the sentencing, will the judge, Vinny's asking, at the sentencing, will the judge have any discretion? This is her first felony. The judge made that very clear. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, will Sarah Boone say something? Will she express any sort of remorse for what took place? Will she make a statement in allocution at her sentencing? I know you have to take some preparation time for that.
I think the prosecutor had said the low end of the guidelines was 22 years, and I think the judge told Sarah that, so I think that probably is the minimum, unless there's something I'm missing, maybe a downward departure. I don't know that she would qualify, but the judge has a range, and the judge has the discretion, and the judge, is going to hear from the victim's family, and then the judge is going to hear from Dr. Harper, and ultimately the judge is going to have to hear from Sarah Boone about this. I don't know what her position is going to be, but we'll see.
Now, key ingredient here, I mean, you heard him talk about the sentencing guidelines, who he's going to hear from, this, that, and the other, from Sarah. And again, this is right after the moment. He's like, I don't know what her position is going to be. So twice now, right after the moment, and with Ashley Banfield as well, he said and stated that they are going to be, she's going to be speaking and whatnot. Of course she would. She probably is already engineering that in the frame of mind of like, just let me get up here, I can get the lowest sentence. And again, that's just me. Sofa speculation, that doesn't mean anything. I'm nobody, right? So, but I just feel like that's where she's going to go. Hopefully it won't be that way. Hopefully we'll see some change in her. Hopefully we'll see some sign of remorse or whatnot, or some self-awareness of, maybe, this was whatever. She's got a lot of anger towards George, a lot of anger towards his family, and I would probably argue a lot of anger towards like life itself, it seems. And so, and I mean, I get it. Like sometimes, life is hard, right? I mean, it is what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that you could just go around and, do what you want to do, and that type of thing, but it is what it is. So overall, my biggest takeaways from hearing the things that James Owen has had to say is that Sarah was completely blindsided and shocked, which that blindsides and shocks me, in that, or I'm like, okay, I can't believe that. She's going to speak at the sentencing. Can't waver that. And they just did not, they think that she's battered spouse syndrome and that they were going to get a lesser charge. And that's kind of that. So okay. Would love to see what takes place after, let this go by a couple of years, whatever, see if he has something to say. Now, it's my understanding at this point that when she if she appeals, but you already know she will, he's not an appeal lawyer, he won't be working with her. Now, for that process, if obviously, hopefully, it's in her best interest and lesson learned, she will get someone to do that. She'll be able to find somebody who wants to do it. This is a notorious case. People will want the notoriety and whatnot to do a pro bono if she doesn't have any money or anything. So there'll be that. So that being said, we'll wait for sentencing December 2nd. We'll see what she's got to say. We'll see what they're going to give her, and we'll go from there. If you're still watching, well, hey, I appreciate you and I appreciate that. If you don't mind, drop some little sofas off in the comment section. For myself, Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke, those are the little doggies. They're running around, okay? That's who that is. But we just need a little place in the comment section to hang out, talk about this case and all the other ones we talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we meander our way on down there to do that, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. Also, if you're looking for merch, be sure to check out my Teespring store. I'll put that up here. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.